Hello, Connecticut, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. The title basically says it all. I'm Nancy Barrow, and I will be delving into this new state program and how it can help you and your family. This podcast will give you information you should know about Connecticut paid leave and maybe just a little bit more. Connecticut paid leave brings peace of mind to your home, family, and workplace. Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. November is National Family Caregivers Month, and National Family Health History Day is November 28th. My guest is Sean Scanlon. He began his term as comptroller for the state of Connecticut in 2023. And before that, he worked as a state representative in the 98th District. And in the House, Sean became a champion for health care reform, a passion rooted in his own life experiences coming from a family that was often uninsured or underinsured. As chairman of the legislature's Insurance Committee, Sean wrote and passed legislation protecting people with pre-existing conditions from insurance discrimination and prevented insurance companies from covering mental health differently than physical health. And Sean served as chair of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, where he led the fight to create tax relief for working families like the one he grew up in, and worked with Governor Lamont to pass the largest tax cut in state history. And we thank you for that, Sean.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast.
Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, I don't know you personally, Sean, but we have two things in common before we start. I've had your wife, Megan, on this podcast talking about domestic violence with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and she's brilliant. And also, happy belated anniversary.
Thank you. So I'm now the second Scanlon on this podcast, which is cool.
Yeah.
And thank you for the nice anniversary shout out. We just celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary.
Well, that is something, isn't it? And I had the pleasure also of having Senator Chris Murphy on talking about isolation and loneliness. And he said that he was most proud of the gun control laws that he passed from the Sandy Hook tragedy. And that's something that you worked with him on when you worked for Chris Murphy.
I did. I worked for Chris in a very difficult period when he was in between being a congressman for the 5th District, which included the town of Newtown, and then becoming a U.S. senator. And in between that weird period was when the tragedy in Sandy Hook happened. And so I was working in his office. I was actually supposed to be with him that day, which I'm eternally thankful that I wasn't. Because the person who ended up being with him has had a lot of PTSD around being with him at the school and being there when the parents were told that their kids were no longer alive. But it really did fuel Chris to do the work that he did. And it was really, really impactful to work with him. And more importantly, those families who I got to know quite well during that period to try to do something about this terrible epidemic that we have in this country. Lots of preceding guests on this podcast. But.
Yeah. Well, those are the things that we have in common. But let's talk about you and the Office of Comptroller. What do you do? I know you handle finances for the state, but you do a lot in this office that maybe people don't know about.
Yeah. So in some ways, people may say I'm sort of like the co-chief financial officer along with the treasurer. And he's all the money coming in and I'm all the money going out. So we pay all the state's bills. We keep the state's books. We do all of the benefit negotiation. So, for example, I run the largest healthcare plan in the state of Connecticut besides Medicaid. 250,000 people get their health insurance through our office. And in some ways, we become sort of like the catch-all agency. So I run a flood program for the residents of Hartford. I run a retirement plan for small businesses called MyCTSavings. I run a drug discount card for the people of Connecticut called ArrayRx. In some ways, we do a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, according to Wikipedia, at least, I am the chief fiscal watchdog of Connecticut, and I take that role really seriously. And every day, we just try to help the people of Connecticut in some way, even if it's not the ways that typically lead the news.
And how are our finances looking for the state as we go into 2026?
Well, you mentioned I was a state representative before this, and I got elected 10 years ago to that job. And when I took office in that job, we were in the midst of a really bad fiscal crisis in Connecticut. We had record number of people leaving the state, businesses leaving the state, huge budget deficits that were being closed by big tax increases on people, big spending cuts on people. And it was really not great for me because I showed up in Hartford in the only suit that I owned, very idealistic, wanting to change the world and wanting to do all these things to help people that I had met during my campaign. And all those things were almost put on hold because we had no ability to do anything but deal with this deficit. We passed a bipartisan budget in 2017, to make a long story short, that changed the way how we budget as a state. And as a result of that bipartisan budget, in the last 8 years, we've had 8 consecutive years of budget surpluses. We've put aside $4 billion in our rainy day fund. We've paid off about $10 billion of our massive unfunded pension liability. And so by all these different milestones, we are in a much better place than we have been in a long time. And in my mind, we ended that fiscal crisis that we had experienced for the last decade or so. And we're on much, much better financial footing today, which I think is something to be proud of, but we still have a lot of work left to do, and nobody is declaring victory.
Yeah, but having that kind of surplus is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, look, because of the pension debt that we're paying down, which is almost like if you start paying down more on your credit card, you have a lesser payment. We now freed up in the last fiscal year alone $750 million that otherwise would have went to paying off debt that can now go to do things like cut taxes or invest in different programs that help people. And so it sounds crazy when I say this, but to my friends in the Democratic Party who maybe want to spend more or do more, I always say the most progressive thing I think that we can do is to continue to be fiscally responsible. And that kind of makes heads explode because people don't really understand what that means. But what it means is if we get through this difficult period and we get this sort of millstone off of our neck that is this debt, we'll be able to do much, much more down the road for the people of Connecticut, for my kids' generation, for my kids' kids' generation, if we stop the things that built up over time because of people kicking the can down the road, and we could actually get out of this and then turn the corner on creating a state that all of us want to see.
Well, you were raised by a single mom after your parents divorced, and your dad was a police officer. Your grandfather was a firefighter. Who was your biggest influence in your decision to help people and then serve in politics for the capacity of the residents of Connecticut?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad and my grandfather were like my heroes, right? And I thought that I wanted to be a cop or a firefighter. It was sort of in the blood. But a funny thing happened when I was a teenager. When I was 16, I got assigned to do a book report about Bobby Kennedy. And I had never had any interest in politics. I honestly don't remember my parents ever voting or even talking about politics. It just wasn't something that I grew up, knowing about. And for whatever reason, it sounds corny now when I tell students the story, but this story of Bobby Kennedy just really, really captured me in a way that was unexpected. And this idea that you could have a job where you go and help people that are often ignored or not seen or sort of in the shadows was so inspiring to me. And it sort of resonated with me because when my parents split up, my dad moved back to New York where he was from, and I was raised here by my mom who had grown up here. And she had a lot of struggles. She had no job. She had no education beyond a high school degree. And she decided to start a business in order to try to, keep the rent paid in our apartment and keep the lights on. And I saw her struggle a lot in that decade plus after my parents got divorced before I went off to college. And I just was really interested in this idea that I could have a job where I could help people like my mom. And I did that book report and then sponged up everything I could about other people that had done this and decided to get involved locally in politics. And the rest, I guess, is history.
Shout out to that teacher that made you do that book report.
Side note about him is what's funny is his name is Jim Powers. He's retired from Guilford High School. But a few years ago, I've told this story so much that CEA, which is the main teachers union in Connecticut, they asked me to film this special with him called Because of a Teacher. And I talked to him on camera about this crazy experience. And it was cool to see his reaction because, teachers do a lot of great work every day. But sometimes I think it can feel like, do these kids really care about Robert Kennedy, right? And I
Yeah.
obviously really cared about Robert Kennedy, and I think it was a cool full circle moment for him. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Speaking of single moms and struggles, let's talk about MyCTSavings. You mentioned that
Yeah.
earlier. When
Yeah.
I'm doing outreach at events around the state, I've met a lot of people from MyCTSavings tabling there too, and we've become friends. But how does this program help people in Connecticut with retirement?
Well, I'll go back to my mom, right? My mom, every dollar she ever earned when she had her business went to the bare necessities, right? And she could never afford to either save for her own retirement, and she could certainly not afford to pay for a retirement plan for her employees, even though she wanted to desperately. That's the case for most small businesses in the state. It's not that they don't want to offer good benefits, it's that they can't afford to. And what MyCTSavings does is it allows small businesses to offer their employees retirement at no cost to them. And this program has been around for a number of years, but it really just got going almost by fate to me beginning this job. I voted for this program back in 2016 when it first passed the legislature, but then it was stalled for 5 or 6 years in some controversy. But it finally got transferred over to my office before I was the comptroller. And so when I started this job in January of 2023, we had 700 companies enrolled in this plan. I have made it my personal mission to expand this thing. We now have 7,500 enrolled in just the last couple of years. And so I love to do business walks. I've been to half the main streets in Connecticut with mayors and first selectmen, just knocking on doors, handing out flyers, telling people about this. And I think through word of mouth and through the things that you see our team at, we're making real progress, making sure that everybody in Connecticut has access to a retirement account. And sometimes the criticism of this plan is, I'll go speak to like a chamber of commerce or something, and somebody says, well, my father on my 18th birthday took me down to Charles Schwab and created an account. If that's the case for you, that's awesome. I love that. That's great that your father had that financial literacy. God bless both my parents. They didn't have that. Their parents didn't have that. I am breaking the cycle for my children for two families, two lines of a family, because I'm the first person in my family to have a retirement account, right? And that's the case for many of the people that we're helping. They are breaking the stigma of financial illiteracy, and they're breaking that barrier that then is such a difference maker for the next generation of that family. And so I don't begrudge anybody. If you have a dad that is a Wall Street stockbroker and he's been investing in all your funds since you were born, that's amazing for you. I love that. But if you're the kind of person who grew up in a household like me and you didn't have that financial literacy, not because your parents were not bad people, but because they didn't have those tools, MyCTSavings is a way to have that tool, and it's never too early and it's never too late to start saving. And I'm really, really proud that we're helping over 40,000 people save, most of them for the first time in Connecticut right now.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's really something you're investing in yourself.
Absolutely.
You had a roundtable discussion about caregiving and the sandwich generation and the complications of caring for your elderly parents and kids at the same time, and the resources available in our state. And our CEO, Aaron Choquette, was on the roundtable.
Yeah.
Why was that so important for you to talk about?
Well, it's like a future of my life. I can see the premonition of this coming. And unfortunately, this is bigger than just me. This is most people, exactly tied into what we just talked about, right? People, God willing, are living longer, but they don't have the means to live longer. And so security for most people doesn't work anymore. Not to keep talking about my mom, but my mom is now in her mid 70s and she still works every day 9 to 5 because she can't afford to live just on Social Security. That story is the story of so many people in our state. But what happens is all people hit a wall, right? There will be a time where my mom literally physically cannot work 9 to 5. She never wants to admit that, but there's going to be a time that happens. And when that happens, the burden of caring for her to make sure that she is safe and secure and has what we all want and need in retirement is going to fall on me and my wife, just like her parents will fall on me and my wife. But the thing is that burden, and burden is a strong word, but that responsibility maybe is going to hit us at the same time we still have small kids. And that is exactly what the sandwich generation is all about, right? Is you're trying to care for your elderly parents at the same time you're caring for your small children. And my generation and the generation above me and the generation below me are kind of the first generation to have to deal with that, because previous generations, you maybe had a pension, you were okay. You maybe live 10 or 15 years after you retire, and then you die because you had a lifetime of hard work. Now people are living longer, and therefore there's just not enough of a societal safety net for them that they can afford, especially as costs go up for things like rent and for long-term care and for food and all these things. And so we did that roundtable with Erin, who is amazing, and many other people in this space like AARP and different advocacy groups, to try to draw attention to this, because programs like paid family leave, most people don't know, are a resource for the exact kind of people like this. Caregiving is something you don't have to do alone. It is not a burden you have to bear. There are tools in place to help you do it. And I think some big part of this is just letting people know that these programs are available to them. And that roundtable is what that was all about.
Caregiving is so important. What was your big takeaway personally from that discussion?
That people don't realize that we've made progress as a state, right? I was a lawmaker for 8 years. I passed a lot of laws. I'm now on the executive side, so I see it in both ways. But sometimes politicians pass a law and then they say, my job is done. I've solved this problem, right? But if you don't implement things correctly in government, or if you don't spread the word about what we do, there's some self-importance in this business, right? Where you live in this cocoon of the Capitol or politics where, you send out a newsletter to your constituents and say, I passed the paid family leave law, right? And you're like, we're done. We've solved all the problems, right? But if I had $1 for every day that I hear somebody telling me about a story and I say, hey, have you checked out can I get paid family leave? And they're saying, no, what is that, right? We have to educate people about the things that we've done well as a state. And one of the things that I think we've done really well, and one of the things I was very, very deeply proud to vote for in 2019, was this program, because it is a game changer for people in our state not to have to make the impossible choices that people have to make in other places. And I think that that's something that's really, really important for our state.
You worked hard to get mental health taken care of the same way physical health is taken care of. And why was that important for you to kind of take away that stigma of getting help for your mental well-being?
Well, because it is still stigmatized, right? And, I'm a firm believer, deep believer in mental health. My dad was an alcoholic in long-term recovery. I never saw him drink. He quit drinking the month before I was born. My mom sort of said to him, you can go to rehab or you can leave. And he chose to go to rehab. And so I never saw him drink. But when my parents split up when I was 6, when I would go to see my dad, there was no babysitter. He would take me with him to AA meetings, which was kind of a messed up place for a young person to be. But I would sit in these rooms with these men, because a lot of times he would go to just men's meetings. He was a tough Marine and a cop. And then you'd see these grown men who I viewed as like him, right? Who were all cops, firefighters, had served in the military, uncontrollably sobbing and very upset because they had all this trauma that they didn't know what to do with. And the one thing that they did know what to do with it was to medicate themselves with alcohol. But once that went away, they didn't have the resources to then figure out how to deal with that trauma besides the one thing that they knew how to deal with it. And hearing these people talk about how broken their lives were and how they had lost wives and children and jobs and all these things. And I just really believed that people like my dad could have benefited so much from mental health care, but they never got it for primarily 2 reasons. Number one, it was so stigmatized that, going to talk to somebody about how you were feeling and what you were thinking about was somehow not masculine or not important. But number 2 is, even if they got past that stigma, which is a really high burden, where the hell do you go to get affordable care for these kind of things? And how do you, treat those conditions if it's not covered by your insurance, or if it's covered by insurance, but you have to pay out of pocket an arm and a leg? And so when I got to the legislature, healthcare was always the thing that I cared the most about. But the subset of healthcare that I cared the most about was mental health and substance use. And not to drone on about it too long, but when I got to Hartford for the first time, it was at the height of the opioid crisis. And that had been going on for a very long time, but it was heightened in the public consciousness because suburban people were starting to die and young people were starting to die in really, really big numbers. And people were saying, why? Why is this happening? Well, it was the same crisis, right? Stigmatized mental health care and unaffordable access to the care. And so tried to make a lot of progress in the 8 years that I was there. And the law that I am still to this day most proud of. And I don't have a big trophy wall behind me of all my accomplishments and people, awed at my power here in my office. But the one picture I have of a bill signing from the probably 100 or so bills that I passed as a legislator is this Mental Health Parity Act passed in 2019. We passed an updated version of it in 2025. And it basically, as you said, the premise is so simple. It's just that insurance companies cannot discriminate or treat insurance differently for mental health than they do for physical health. And I would like to think, and I know from anecdotal evidence, that there's been a lot more people in our state that have been able to get the care that my father never could because of a law like this. And again, it's a great step in the right direction. As I said, we just had to update it because people were finding ways around it. This is a constant struggle. We'll never fully win this battle, but we are making progress. And I think we should be really proud of that.
And Connecticut paid leave does cover mental health and addiction treatment. A lot of people don't know those little caveats that we do, but we do cover that. And our caregiver leave is so unique and important in the fact that you don't have to be blood related. We have that expanded definition of family that's related by affinity, which is so cool that it could be a neighbor, a coworker, best friend, or a partner that you live with but aren't married to that can take care of you if you have a serious health condition. I mean, it's so important.
All of us experience this in our life, right? Whether it's with parents, whether it's with your children, or whether it's with somebody you love that you're not, to your point, related to, right? All of us have people in our life that, we have these strong relationships with, and they may not be related to us, but that doesn't mean that they don't matter to us. And I think the fact that we've set up a system where you don't have to make, like we said, those impossible choices, and you can help the people that you love get better. Or you can get yourself better, right? These are the things that I think truly matter. And we talk a lot about, as a state, what we could do to make Connecticut more fiscally sound, to grow our economy. I think at the end of the day, we need to make our state more affordable. I spend a lot of my time focused on how to make the state more affordable. But if we can make it more affordable, and it's a place that people want to be, because it's the kind of place that you don't have to make that choice, or it's the kind of place that you can get an apartment that's affordable for you, or you can go to a great school and have a great park down the street, right? These are the kind of things that make a difference when people decide where they want to live. And if we can crack the code on affordability, we've already cracked the code on getting our fiscal house in order. And with those two things together, I think we're going to start to see more people coming to Connecticut because of what we offer. And that's going to grow the economy, and that's going to lift up all the voices that we want to see. And that sort of rising tide lift all boats theory. And I just feel like we're at this great moment in Connecticut where we've gotten through some really hard stuff. We've made some hard decisions, but a good future is ahead. And I think we've got these really good foundations, paid family leave being one of them, that are going to pave the way for us to ultimately have more success as a state than we have right now.
As the governor says, it's a family-friendly state. That's what some of these programs are doing. What about Array RX, and how does that help Connecticut families get access to prescription drugs?
Everybody in our state knows that drug prices are crazy right now. And whether you have insurance or you don't have insurance, sometimes it doesn't seem to matter, because when you go to the pharmacy, you see this big cost that you can't afford. And I'm somebody who just believes that nobody should have to consider not getting a prescription because they can't afford it. That was my mom's story. I remember going to CVS in Guilford with her, and she'd be begging the pharmacist behind the counter if there was some sort of alternative drug that she could call the doctor back and get because she couldn't afford the one that we were getting. And when I was growing up, I just thought this was her problem, right? And then I got older and realized that half the people standing in line with her at the CVS were going to have the same damn conversation with that pharmacist, right? The answer to this is absolutely at the federal level. We need to negotiate the price of drugs for all drugs that we buy. America is one of the only countries in the entire world that doesn't do that, which is, surprise, surprise, why drug prices are cheaper in every part of the world except for the United States. However, Washington, in case you didn't notice, doesn't get a lot done these days because they're mired in gridlock. And so the states really need to step up and try to solve these problems, because we can't just blame Washington and say, well, these knuckleheads down there can't get their act together. I guess we're just stuck with XYZ problem. No, we have to act. And one of the ways that Connecticut is acting is to create this drug discount card. It's called ArrayRx. You can get it right now. Literally pause this podcast, go to arrayRxcard.com. And within 2 minutes, you can download this free card that you can use at 98% of the pharmacies in the state. Whether you like to go to CVS or Walgreens or Walmart or the independent pharmacy down the street from you, all of them, 98% of them take this. And right now, we see an average of 80% savings on generic drugs and 20% savings on brand name drugs. Average savings is about $200 for the people who are using it. $200 is a big deal. And as I tell people all the time, this is not age restricted. So you can be a senior or you can be an 18-year-old unemployed, uninsured college student, right? There are many different ways that you can access this. And I just encourage everybody to go check out ArrayRxCard.com and make sure that you get your card and try it out. And I guarantee you'll save something.
It's so good that you're doing that. What are you most proud of since you took this job as comptroller?
It's a really inside baseball thing, but one of the things that we do as comptroller is to run this, it's called the MERS pension system. It's the municipal pension system. 107 of our 169 towns have some involvement in this pension system. When I showed up to work here, I got a briefing book that was like 800 pages long. And one of the things that they talked about was how this plan was in big trouble and that the contribution rates that the towns had to pay into it had risen by 75% in the preceding 5 years, which was unsustainable for them. And so you had a system where some of these towns were saying, we may have to lay off firefighters, we may have to lay off the road crew. And these are things that nobody should have to do, right? That would jeopardize the safety of different communities. And so I asked the guys, why has nobody fixed this? And they kind of laughed and they said, well, nobody has reformed this system in 50 plus years. It just is the way it is. It's really hard. And nothing triggers my personality like wanting to dive in and fix something than somebody saying, well, it's hard and nobody's, been able to do it. So over the course of 6 weeks, I brought together Democrats and Republicans, labor unions, the mayors and first selectmen, and we reformed the system for the first time in decades in 2023, which results in saving the taxpayers in those communities about $800 million over the course of the next 30 years. And I think has made the program more sustainable so that towns can go out and recruit cops and firefighters. Again, something that's not easy to do today because I know firsthand how hard those jobs are. But those jobs are increasingly only filled by people who say, hey, I'll run into a burning building, I'll chase this person, but I need a pension, right? I need a secure retirement. And unfortunately, because the MERS system was in such bad shape, that was not the reality for a lot of people. So I think fixing that is the thing I'm most proud of. But I tell you one other thing, too, which is that I'm the youngest person to ever have this job. And as we've discussed for the last half an hour, this job is pretty wonky and in the weeds, and most people don't know what I do. And that's fine. I don't expect people are going to have universal understanding of the Byzantine world of financing governments and how to do all these things. But what we do does impact people. And what I've tried to do in my time here as the youngest person ever to have it is to make what we do more accessible to people. Because again, I don't want someone to have a degree in accounting or a ton of financial literacy just to understand what we do, because this is their money. And I want everyday people to understand it. So I probably spend too much time trying to work with our team to break things down in a way that someone like, again, my mom or my father could have understood, so that when government is understood and accessible, I think it's at its best. And so I try really hard to make comptrolling accessible to the people of Connecticut.
I just want to say thank you, Sean Scanlon, the Comptroller of the state of Connecticut. Thank you for all you do for state workers, for firefighters, for the cops, for also doing the Fallen Hero Fund. You've done so much for them, and that is such an important thing that you've done to expand, those services to the fallen heroes. So we appreciate you doing that, and thanks for your service to the people of Connecticut.
Yeah, at the end of the day, politics is personal. And the reason why we think about politics is because of things that are personal to our lives. And in many ways, politics has sort of gotten out of control these days. And everybody I know bemoans the state of our politics. But I think the answer to it is to bring it back to what drives us all personally. And if we can have conversations like this about the things that drive us personally or that are demanding more of us, and we can talk together about solutions, I think we can bring down the climate heat a little bit and get back to trying to solve problems, because that's at the end of the day, that's what we need to do for each other, whether it's caring for sick people, whether it's solving the thing that's causing your neighborhood to smell bad because there's a broken sewer pipe. These are all just basic humanity things. And if we can make life easier for people, we've done our job in government. Paid family leave is doing that every single day for people in our state. And I continue to be such a strong supporter of what you do there. And I'm so grateful for it. And I look forward to partnering more, because the more we can do to get more people to understand this incredible benefit we have in the state, the better off our state's fiscal health is going to be, and the better off our physical health is going to be. And I think if we could do both those things, the future is very bright for Connecticut. So thanks for interviewing me. Thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for being a guest on the Paid Leave podcast, Sean. Now you can talk to your wife about it.
Now you got to interview the kids.
The kids
then
next.
Go for the 3 and the 4P.
Well, thank you so much again. For more information or to apply for benefits, please go to ctpaidleave.org. This has been another edition of the Paid Leave podcast. Please like and subscribe so you'll be notified about new podcasts that become available. Connecticut Paid Leave is a public act with a personal purpose. I'm Nancy Barrow, and thanks for listening.